else you're finding us, which now you will be able to find the audio for this podcast over on Spotify. We just got that up on Anchor.fm, and Anchor is generous enough to go ahead and distribute it through a number of platforms so far. You can now find Fighting the Void on Spotify, although it's going to take us a little time to catch up with the archives and get it all up there. But it's coming. I've already got about a dozen episodes up there, so if you're new, you can go back and catch up in a nice, easy format and set us to 2x speed and get through it all real quick. All right. So now with the maintenance out of the way,
Yes.
we have got a very special guest here on the show. It's someone that we've come to know through Twitter a little bit over the last few months. And CC here has got quite the story that she's graciously agreed to come on and share. In short, she's a long time ago in her much younger days, she had an abortion and has long since come to regret it, and has recently started really being able to process it and make it something that she's able to discuss. Mm-hmm. So, CC, thank you so much for coming on the show and being willing to discuss this with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
When you want to get the tissues. So.
Yes. For anyone who is sensitive on this sort of thing, take a minute, go get some tissues, because, you might need them. All right. So, CC, let's just kind of get right into it. How old were you when you set the stage for us, if you will?
Well, to explain the reasoning behind the abortion, I'd have to go back about a year.
Okay.
October 21st of 1989, I was sexually assaulted. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. And my significant other at the time was not supportive. He didn't feel that I was telling the truth about the assault, and became very verbally abusive. It became a very difficult relationship to be in. So I chose to give that child up for adoption.
Okay.
I didn't want to raise her in that kind of environment with that kind of negativity. I wanted her to have a positive upbringing, and I really didn't feel that I could. I was dealing enough with the assault and with my significant other not being supportive, and I just wanted better for her. So we gave her up when she was an infant, or 3 days out of the hospital, and then probably about 4 months later, I found out I was pregnant again, and he decided we couldn't go through this again. He asked me to have an abortion. I refused. Mm-hmm. And he would come and pick me up for lunch at work, and all during the lunch he would berate me and tell me we can't do this. The emotional strain is too much, and we're not ready, and on and on and on. And after about, I don't know, I want to say 6-7 weeks of this, I finally caved. I had the abortion. I remember going to the clinic that day, and it just felt so, I don't know, impersonal. Nobody really told me exactly what was going to happen. There was no, it was just very, we're going to go in and clean the tissue out, I believe is the term they use. We're going to clean the tissue out. We're going to give you a painkiller. You'll be here for a little while, and then we'll send you home. So I went in. I was in a room with probably 7 other women, and we each went in, had our procedures. we came back out and all sat in this little room in recliners, and I don't think anyone said a word.
All right. They went
I
through
don't.
7 women all in the same room, kind of one right after the other.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I went home. Didn't think. I mean, I cried a little bit, but I think I had convinced myself this wasn't a real child, so it was okay.
Right. It was the tissue.
It was tissue, yes. So
Right.
all I was doing was removing this tissue, and it wasn't until this whole pro-life, all these arguments started coming up on Twitter that it really hit me. And then when people started posting videos of abortions and posting pictures of babies that were cut up into pieces and everything, it's then that it really hit what I had actually done. And I was angry because I remember a few weeks after this, we were at my in-laws' house and we were falling asleep, and my significant other started crying, and I said, "What are you crying about?" And he said, "I took 2 babies away from you." And I said, "You don't
Wow.
get to do that. You don't get to do that. That's not okay. You don't get, no." I didn't talk to him for quite a long time. So
So you actually, so you actually stayed with this guy for a long time.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I did.
Now, I forget, were you married, or were you married at, like, back in '89, or?
We were not married at
Okay.
that time.
Okay.
We did eventually get married, and
Okay.
I couldn't tell you why. To be honest with you, I think I just thought I couldn't do any better.
Okay.
And I just thought, I can't live without this man. I love him. I've been with him for so long, and I don't even know why I stayed after everything that
Right.
that we went through together and separately, because I wasn't allowed to talk about the assault. I wasn't allowed to talk about how I felt about the abortion because it was too traumatic for him. It was too upsetting for him. So I didn't.
That's interesting. It seems he actually seemed to come to regret it himself.
I think he did, but that was the only statement that he ever made.
Okay.
In that, other than, I just can't handle talking about it. That it was never,
Well, that's not much for me
let's
at all.
work together and get through this. It was never anything like that.
Right. So he was sort of too wrapped up in his own guilt over it to actually help you all. Yeah. Instead of
Right.
getting through it together, it was, let's bury it together, so to speak.
Right. Well, he was already convinced that that I wasn't assaulted.
Right.
He and his drunk friends had, gotten together and decided that I just made it up. So,
yeah.
He had trust issues, clearly. So.
Yeah, clearly.
He has an issue of coming to terms with things, and he always, like, it sounds like he always, like, in the stages of grief, he always got to the denial stage and then just stuck there.
Yeah.
So this would have been, now the abortion, I'm guessing you would have been about, what, 3 months along?
Yeah.
Ish. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay. Just like I said before the show, we've had a few kids, so I know where most people are when they realize that they're pregnant.
Yeah.
So wow. Okay. And they were still telling you at that time that we're just cleaning out the tissue, and, well, obviously I don't need to go into how that's not remotely the case, and obviously not the case at that point.
Right.
So you said it was a lot of the you started seeing stuff on Twitter that made you kind of come back to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was able to just, I don't know. Not that I ever forgot about it.
Right.
But I was always able to just go, well, okay, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just tissue. And I think also getting back to my faith,
Mhm.
that also, made it that much more real for me.
Okay.
And for me personally, it's just wrong. I mean, I'm never going to tell a woman you can't do what you feel that you need to do with your body. However, I implore women to become educated about what's going to happen to you.
Mhm.
That they
And
understand exactly what it is they're doing.
right, and be aware that this isn't, I mean, you can see all these celebrities just on TV, just the abortions were the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, inside, unless you're a complete sociopath, you have to be struggling in some way, I would think,
Yeah.
unless you just have no feeling or emotion. How can you just celebrate killing all these children and thinking, well, that's not a big deal. It's just I
Right.
wasn't ready and me and that's what bothers me the most, I think, is all of these arguments is it's all about the mother, and nobody says anything about the children other
No.
than, well, maybe they'd be in foster care. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe somebody would adopt them. My daughter is 29 years old. She turned 29 this year. She was adopted into a wonderful family. She's had an amazing life. She's a beautiful young woman who is just contributing so much to society. And while giving your child up is incredibly painful, watching her grow, I mean, I was fortunate. The adoption was very open. So
Okay.
I've always known where she was. The parents have always sent me pictures. They always sent me letters about, she started walking, she started talking, all of these things. She's been able to travel the world and just have an amazing life. So for somebody to say, well, they may end up in foster care, well, maybe, but is that better than, I mean, is that worse than you sucking the life out of your child or
Right.
killing their child? And
It's a
it just,
pretty pessimistic and cynical outlook on life. That
it really is.
yeah, and it's not like it's an outlook that you're bringing to it before the situation even arises. I gotta think
Right.
it's got to be kind of, you have to already kind of be in that stage where it's like, well, you're even questioning the value of your own life to say, it's better to not exist than to exist, essentially, is what's being said.
Right.
When people make that, it's like, well, I don't want them to feel pain and suffering, so I'll kill them.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but okay, clearly we have
why not
different outlooks on life.
why not just be responsible in the first place? Why not just use protection or do everything you can to prevent that situation in the first place? If you're not ready to have a child, why not? I mean,
My mom always said, it's like, if you're not prepared to pay, you better not play.
exactly.
To just, to boil it down to a little bit of common sense, you don't want the kid, you don't have the sex. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, well, they one tends to kind of lead to the other.
Right.
At least, it's what I remember from biology.
Yeah.
Now, my goodness. So it's so interesting. Was there anything in particular that really got your attention as you started seeing some of these? What made you even start looking at some of the pro-life arguments in the first place, especially since this is such a fairly recent thing, so far removed from the actual abortion?
I think just it started coming up on my timeline so much, and I've always been pretty much pro-choice. I mean, I've never really agreed with abortion, but I've always thought it's none of my business what other people do.
Right. You are sort of
Um,
I've noticed some people have started making a distinction between people that are pro-choice and people that are pro-abortion.
Right.
Like the people that are pro-choice, like you can actually win. You can actually have civil discussions and even win those people over. They're not completely given over to
Right.
the other side. They're not shout your abortion people.
Yeah, that those people infuriate me, and they just, I feel bad for them in a way, because I mean, it seems to me that they're swallowing an awful lot of pain, because how come you have so many abortions and not be affected by it?
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, to be honest with you, I wasn't affected for quite a long time, but I started seeing these pictures and hearing these people just talk so callously about this life. You know, it's not just a clump of cells, it's not just tissue, it's another human life separate from the mother. And
Exactly.
and for people to just talk about it like you're disposing of a dirty tissue or something is reprehensible to me. It's so disgusting to me that and it's heartbreaking, because it seems to me that we're just teaching our children, you can go and do what you want, you can live whatever kind of life you want, and there's no consequences.
Yeah.
You can have abortions and it's no big deal, it's not going to affect you, but it does. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
See, I wonder, is it really that recent? Because I remember when I was growing up, like I don't know if you guys ever saw these, but growing up, I remember seeing PSAs about other women talking about their regrets about having an abortion. So I don't know if maybe there was like a quiet period or what, because I remember that vividly growing up, like those
Oh, yeah.
PSAs.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as CC's own coming and noticing this being recent.
Okay.
But yeah, there is, and CC. I don't. Hey, have you heard of the Silent No More campaign group? I don't know how to properly put it, but
I have, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, it's sort of I guess a movement is a good way to put it, of women and some men who, and I don't mean like in a trans sense, but men who have either they've encouraged their girlfriends or wives to have abortion, or just they've supported it in the past, and people that have come to regret either having abortions or having facilitated it in the past. And there's a lot of heart-wrenching stories out there, much like CC's, where women that are in a bad situation, they have an unsupportive husband or boyfriend who, like you said, cave to the pressure and go and have the abortion, and then it winds up something that becomes extremely difficult to deal with down the road. And other people who, again, like yourself, have been courageous enough to actually speak out, because there's a lot of people that don't think you exist.
Right.
That don't think that the regret is real.
But I'm also amazed at how many people completely disregard the men in this.
Mm-hmm.
The men that didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
That, found out that their girlfriend or their wives or whatever were going to have an abortion or did have an abortion against their will. And it breaks my heart that they're so disregarded, and people seem to look down on them like they're less than because they're grieving the loss of this child. And they have every right to grieve it. They have every right to mourn this loss.
Mm-hmm.
It's their child as well. Why wouldn't you mourn it? I mean, my children's father and I, we had a miscarriage right before we found out we were, we had a miscarriage on my husband's birthday. And I say we because my husband was affected just
Yeah.
as much as I was. And then a few months later found out that I was pregnant with my son. But it tore him up just as much as it would,
Yeah.
me. So for people to think that the fathers have, it's like they're emotionless. Like, well, you don't get to have feelings about this. You don't get to be upset about this. And
Mhm.
like a friend of mine said, why should I have to pay for a child that I didn't want if you're not going to give me any kind of, it's essentially the woman gets to make the woman gets to make all the decisions. We decide whether or not you even know that you have a child on the way.
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
we decide if you know that you're the father. We decide that you're going to pay child support. We decide whether or not you get a say in anything. So, and I find that incredibly unfair, because that is not the way that it was intended to be. I firmly believe that God wanted us all to come together as couples and make children and populate the earth, and not, and I understand that there are so many different situations out there. I'm not bashing single parents in any way. I am one right now.
Mhm.
But I think to just disregard the fathers is just not acceptable. It's
No. I mean, I think one of the clearest things out there right now is so many of the problems that we have in society is precisely because of a lack of fathers, and this sort of thing where it's like when it comes to the very life of their own children, the fathers have zero, frankly, have zero say, or at least can very easily, any say that they think they have can easily be done away with. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a gentleman on the show who was in exactly that situation, he tried to convince his girlfriend to keep the child, and she said no. And of course, all the things that followed through from that. And I mean, my wife and I, we had a miscarriage ourselves a few years ago, and yeah, I'll tell you right now, I think I was in as many tears as she was. And yeah, it's legitimately rough. It really is.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, you kind of got back. You mentioned again that your own faith has kind of played at least some part in this awakening, I guess, for lack of a better term. Can you elaborate on that at all? What part has your faith played in coming to grips with this whole thing?
After the assault, I walked away from God. I was angry. I didn't understand. Why? How could you let this happen to me? I don't understand. And then to go through everything that my ex-husband put me through, just the complete lack of regard and support and everything. I walked away. I wasn't having it. I just thought, you're not real. You're not there for me. Why should I even believe in you? And
right.
And then after a few, actually several years of not believing in God, I started to realize that I feel the most peace and the most joy when I'm walking in my faith, when I'm being the person that I should be, according to the Bible, according to my faith. And in that, I started to think, well, you killed a child. I mean, I often refer to myself as a murderer because that's the way I feel right now. I murdered my child. There's no other way to say it. And
but I mean, clearly you understand you can find that forgiveness.
Right. Yeah. And I believe that I have, but I have to find that in myself as well, and I just haven't found that yet.
That's
But in
understandable. I mean, honestly, I mean that's understandable. But I mean, I would say personally, rest assured, it's there. I
Mhm.
mean, clearly the repentance is real, and he doesn't reject that.
right, right. And in talking with my children about this,
Mhm.
because I would read something on Twitter, or I would see a picture on Twitter, and just become a complete wreck. My daughter can attest to that. I would sit on the couch and sob and just think these doctors and nurses, they go into work every day knowing what they're doing. I don't understand how. I don't understand how they can pull out these pieces of children and not and just walk away like it's not. I don't understand the thought process.
How do you get
I
to that
just don't.
point?
Yeah. Um I understand that at the stage that I was there. I mean, I don't know about the developmental stage. My daughter probably knows more about that with her biology than I do, but
Nope.
okay. Okay. Well, class-wise, I mean, but
They
I
teach us that in biology.
okay.
They taught us that in health.
Anyway, I'm I just don't I wonder how people can wrap their brains around that.
Yeah.
Or as we hear in the news, them harvesting parts.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. More's been coming out about that too, I've noticed.
I don't understand that. How do you
Well,
take that oath, first do no harm, and then chop up a
Right.
child?
well,
I-
going based off of what you told us of your experience, like being in the clinic or facility or whatever word you want to use of going and getting it done, they use language that's probably for them distance themselves from what they're actually doing, which for a lot of people they use a language like that, distancing themselves as like a coping mechanism. So
Yeah.
like say for example, because like I personally can't bring myself to say that every single person that works at those places is completely like cold about what they're doing.
Right.
right, right.
So I'd say like a lot of it is a coping mechanism to kind of like
Yep.
sugarcoat it. A spoonful of sugar helps it all go down.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
this Abby Johnson story attests to exactly what you're saying, Crystal. That not everyone who works there is completely cold to it. A
right.
lot of them just haven't fully confronted it yet, and of course, Johnson has, made kind of made it her life's work to try to get people out of the abortion industry, which they've had a lot of success doing that. They've gotten over 500 people out of it now,
Right.
including because of their work. I think completely shutting down one clinic because of all the people that they got out of it. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Not everyone who's working there at those places is 100% 100% given over to whatever it is that allows a person to do this sort of thing.
Right. I think that you have to, well, I'm sure it's traumatic for them. So I think I don't know, maybe there's some sort of block that you can put up. Because what I went through was one singular incident. What they go through is numerous every day.
Yeah.
Well,
So I can't imagine.
well, usually when people go through something that's traumatic for them personally, they kind of, till they actually process it, they're kind of in a state of like autopilot because it's difficult to process what exactly is going on. And again, it's a coping mechanism because something traumatic, you kind of you put something your subconscious does something where it's like autopilot, and then you just keep going about your business, not really acknowledging what's going on in here.
And people
Right.
have remarkable capacity for self-deception. I mean, you know, just going back to history, it's in virtually every culture, murder has been illegal, but it's amazing how good we are at defining certain groups of people as human and not human. So, well, you're not fully human, so it's okay to kill you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
yeah. So, the CC, honestly, you've been through just about everything that people associate with frankly, with just about all the horrible things that can happen to a woman. You've had the misfortune to suffer. I was going to say experience, but that just doesn't sound quite right.
Yeah.
Much more appropriate. So, I guess what is assuming you've thought about this, what would you like to see done to kind of help make it easier for a woman who's had to suffer sexual assault to deal with that? So for a woman who's find themselves in a pregnancy that is either they themselves realize is difficult, or the boyfriend or husband is less than thrilled about.
First and foremost, education and support. In my why me, why did this happen? It's been, coming up on 30 years since the assault, and I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that there aren't days that I don't absolutely fall apart. But in going through all of that, I've been able to counsel other women. I've been able to look them in the face and say, I understand what you're going through. And not just the obligatory, I understand. I fully understand.
Right.
There's nothing more condescending to me than have somebody tell me they understand what I'm going through when they've never been through whatever it is I'm dealing with.
Right.
So I think there first and foremost needs to be absolute education. And as much as I hate seeing these videos and pictures on Twitter, I think that it actually is changing minds. Because I think that some young girls out there may think, they see these celebrities, well, like Alyssa Milano, these are the if I hadn't had these abortions, I wouldn't be as happy as I am now, or whatever it is she said, that I found was incredibly irresponsible. Because, young girls look up to celebrities like that. I think we need more people who have gone through abortions, who didn't come out as rosy as Alyssa Milano or Whoopi Goldberg, or all these people who are proclaiming their abortions as, somewhat celebratory. I think we need people to say there is a downside. There is a possibility that you're going to spiral. There is a possibility that you're going to feel horrible about yourself. You're going to, you're going to have consequences. You may think that just having an abortion is getting rid of this pregnancy and now you have no consequences. But as my mother always said, there are no choices in your life that you can make that you will not have consequences for, good or bad. And you need to be able to accept those consequences. And if you can't, you need to make a different choice.
Yeah.
So I think that there needs to be more communication, more education, and definitely more support. Because to be honest with you, I didn't, until I met my husband who passed, I didn't deal with anything. It had been 7 years. I had not dealt with being assaulted, and I was having nightmares, and I was, I was in a very, very bad state. And it wasn't until he actually sat me down and said, you can talk. You can tell me what happened if you're open to talk about it. Yeah. And I'll be here and I won't judge you. it wasn't until that happened that I actually started to heal from that. And I think that's key. I think that people need to be able to, in their comfort level, talk about the things that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
Talking with my children, like I said before, people get down on me for being so open with my children, but I think it's incredibly important that you demand complete honesty from your children. You want to know what they're doing 24/7. You want to know that they're safe. You want to know that they're making the best decisions they can.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you expect them to be honest with you if you're keeping secrets from them, especially huge ones like these? I don't remember when I started talking to my children about what had happened to me, but they were kind of young. I mean, they've been through a lot. They went through, their father being diagnosed with cancer and helping me take care of him until he passed. And they've gone through, me being in and out of the hospital, and they're very, very strong children. And I think that they're stronger because I'm able to talk to them and say, hey, these things could happen, and these are some of the consequences that could happen. I wouldn't be doing them any favors by keeping that from them at all.
Nope, I can.
No.
Again, we were discussing all of that before the show, and I completely agree. It's a matter of trusting them, respecting them enough to share the truth with them. And again, they're usually more intelligent than people give them credit for.
Right.
Now, I mean, you mentioned support, and it honestly, I think the best thing really is the support of people that are close to you. Like your, like your husband, which sounds like you had found a good one there.
Right. I did, yeah.
Yeah. And having people like that in your life, obviously, has got to be the best thing to help you deal with a traumatic experience like that. But of course, not everybody has that, unfortunately.
Right.
As you yourself know,
Right.
it's, and I guess it's a really good thing that there is a lot. I dare say there's a lot more support organizations now than there were back in 1989.
Right.
I imagine, had you tried to look to see if there were any other support type groups out there? I mean, obviously you found
back then.
Yeah.
I didn't think I needed it.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I really didn't think I needed it. I thought, well, I'm fine. It's no big deal. It was just tissue. It's no big deal.
Right. Right. And
so,
but I mean, even before you had made the decision to have the abortion, had you thought of looking to see if there were any crisis pregnancy things or anything?
I actually, I think I was very ashamed of my situation. I spoke with I have a twin sister, so I spoke with her quite a bit, and she's been an amazing support throughout my entire life. And I did speak a little bit with my mother. I never told my mother that I had an abortion. She passed, unfortunately, without knowing, or maybe fortunately. I don't know how she would have felt about it, to be honest with you. But I did have, I had friends that I could talk to, but I never told them the truth. It wasn't until, I want to say 7 or 8 years after the fact, I never told anybody I had an abortion. Well, yeah, my ex-husband knew clearly, but
right.
I never told anybody. I was so ashamed by it because it was never anything that I was raised to do. It wasn't something I believed in. So I sit here, I'm kind of confused about how I processed that, because I knew when I went in that it was wrong. I mean, I fought him on it for so long, but was getting so sick just from the fighting and the arguing that I just was, okay, fine, I'll just do it.
And you hadn't even healed from the assault or any of that
No.
yet. So yeah.
No.
Your defenses were down anyway.
Right. I just
Get your booty hole out of my face.
I really feel like, I mean, and I remember when we went in that day, there were protesters out in front of the clinic.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being angry with them, because I thought, this is hard enough for the people coming in, first of all. And second of all, you don't even know if we're just coming in to have our annual pap smear or whatever. You're just judging and getting in people's faces without even thinking anything. And there was a young girl that was dropped off in the front of the clinic. And I think, if I remember correctly, she said she was 14 years old.
Oh, man.
She was pregnant with her father's child. And he dropped her off to have an abortion.
Wow.
And I thought, I have no right to tell this child that she has to carry a baby to term that is her father's child. I mean, I couldn't fathom the trauma that this child had already gone through. And I wasn't aware of the trauma that we were getting ready to go through.
Right.
So,
and add in the fact that it's like, well, it lines up covering, perpetuating the abuse, but
yeah.
Until
somebody, several years later, I was telling somebody this story, and she said he was getting rid of the evidence.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about that. I was like, oh my goodness, he was.
That's literally what he was doing. Yeah.
He was. Wow. I can't fathom that. I can't fathom, here I was in all my feeling sorry for myself because of what I was going through. But here's this 14-year-old child who has been through more than I could ever imagine in half of my lifetime.
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap my brain around that.
No. And I mean, honestly, who can? It's, I mean, that kind of thing is, honestly, it's too horrible it's almost too horrible to penetrate. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, since you have sort of been open about the assault, the adoption, the abortion, what has been the response of people? I mean, what have you seen? What has sort of come your way since then?
The majority has been, supportive.
Mm-hmm.
There have been people who have been incredibly cruel. I remember one woman telling me, because the men who assaulted me were never imprisoned. The police essentially told me there was nothing they could do. So they walked free. And I remember one woman telling me that if they reoffend, it's my fault because I didn't try hard enough. And I was angry because I went to the police. I did what I was supposed to do. And I gave them, I handed them my attackers on a platter. They were staying in a hotel that I was working at. They were registered there. They had their name and address and everything. They could have just walked up to the room, but they didn't. They didn't do anything.
Wow.
That's
wow.
So that shook me for quite a long time. And honestly, it still affects me because I think, what if they did reoffend? Then there's more victims out there. But that's not my shame to carry. That's theirs.
No, that's not yours to carry in the slightest. That's the cops' shame to carry for not going out and doing something about it when they bloody well had the opportunity.
Right.
Does he have an accent? I've been trying to place his accent this entire time because I know that he's got some sort of accent.
He lives on the East Coast.
That's why.
Okay.
Sorry, I just couldn't take it. I had to know.
Sorry, that would be Michelle. That would be my daughter.
Yes.
Wait,
I'm in the Midwest actually, but you know.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Oh, well then.
Well then, yeah.
As for the abortion, not a lot of people know. Well, now they do put it on Twitter, but I've been called several names. I've been called a murderer. I've been called a hypocrite. I've been called strong, and just the gamut of names. And it's unfortunate that people don't see the whole story before they start making judgments. And
well, I will definitely say this: it takes a certain strength to be able to talk about this publicly and openly at all. And I know, I mean, we followed each other on Twitter for a little while now. I know you get out there and sort of get down into the fray with people, and it's something to be admired, because everything you've gone through, well, I certainly won't pretend to understand it. It's more than I've ever had to experience in my life, and the fact that you can actually deal with it as well as you are dealing with it is very admirable.
Well, I appreciate it. I have had years of counseling, so that helps. Finding a counselor that is, I mean, there's several different kinds out there, and we finding a counselor that you're comfortable with, that not only can ask you questions, but ask the right ones and draw out,
right,
what you may not even realize you're keeping. I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
I think people spend a lot of time in denial about how they feel about things. And you can't, I don't think you can heal if you're holding on to that. I don't think you can heal if you're stuck in the past. Like my husband used to say, stop living in the past. You don't live there anymore.
Right.
You're in the future. So, but he also recognized that there are days that I'm going to be triggered by something. There are times that I'm, it's going to be incredibly difficult. I'm going to see a post that's going to upset me. I'm going to, there's an anniversary is going to come up and I'm going to be upset. And he was always very supportive, and always, most of the time, not even having to say anything. He just recognized that I was in pain, and he was there. And I wish that everybody had that. But like you said, unfortunately, some people just don't have that support system. And that makes me incredibly sad. Because I think it's crucial as a part of healing to not have to go through it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, you don't heal alone. You don't.
No.
You might bury it, you might suppress it, you might be able to go on alone, but you don't heal these sorts of things alone.
Right.
And well, as we're getting in the direction of wrapping things up there, CC, what would, I guess, to anyone who's thinking about abortion, what would be your advice, I guess?
My advice would be to make sure you have a support system. Make sure that you know exactly what's going to be happening to you. Don't just walk in like I did, completely uninformed. I And I know that they say, well, they have to tell you what's going on. Well, back then they didn't. And I don't know if that was that particular clinic, but they were not forthcoming, because I guarantee you, had I had the education that I do now, I would not have gone through with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have left my ex and I would have come back and stayed with my parents, and I would have a 30-year-old child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you're thinking about having an abortion, understand that it's not, in my opinion, I mean, clearly there's differences of opinions all across the board. It's not just tissue. It's not just a clump of cells. It's a child that can bless your life immeasurably. If not your life, it can bless the lives of people who aren't able to have children. And I'm not going to tell you that adoption is easy. Handing your child over to somebody is incredibly difficult, but also can be very rewarding, because I knew right away when I saw the resume of my daughter's parents. I knew right away they were the people that she was meant to be with. And she's, like I said, she's had a very blessed life. It's important for you to understand that there are people out there that will help you.
Mm-hmm.
And, especially if you've gone through a traumatic experience, if you've been raped, if you're a victim of incest, having an abortion may seem like the answer, but in my experience, just compounds the traumatic. It just makes things so much worse without you even realizing that that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly important to deal with all of those things, and it's going to take a long time. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, that it's not going to be years. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to go away, because it won't. I'm not going to lie and say sexual assault or abortion or abuse, any of that. It's not something that goes away. You heal and you're able to cope better, but it's not going to go away. But I think if you're just going in to use abortion as a contraceptive, if you've been completely irresponsible or whatever, and you just decide this is the best way to get rid of whatever this inconvenience to you, this what did I say the other day, this parasite, then you need to educate yourself, because that's not what's going on. And maybe someday when you have that information, it's going to come back and it's going to hurt, and you're going to have to deal with it eventually.
Yeah.
So,
these things only stay buried for so long.
Right. That's just my opinion. I mean, maybe there's people out there who have I'm sure there's people who have a completely different view. They're very vocal about it and sometimes not very kind.
Well, I just kind of when Alyssa Milano says she wouldn't be as happy as she is today if she hadn't had her 2 abortions, there may be a hidden truth in that, because she doesn't strike me as a very happy person.
And I just find it incredibly offensive, Yeah,
no kidding.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe be a little more responsible in the first place, Alyssa. That's all I'm saying. Maybe just not get pregnant in the first place. I don't know. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, no kidding. If it's something that you're going to go off and kill the kid, then maybe just don't.
Yeah.
But
especially if you're a public figure,
Yeah, and you do have little girls looking up to you, and whether they should or not, be looking up to celebrities is an entirely different conversation. The fact is, they do, and I mean, it's not the best example to set. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's sending a completely horrific message. You
You
know,
know,
I've noticed in my
Oh no.
you're roboting a
there
little
of
bit
each
there.
other. They're sexting each other. It's just, my daughter is talking about her friends who are, who've been sleeping around and they're 15, 16 years old. And I can't wrap my brain around that. What is going on? I mean, so now you have all these kids that are just having sex everywhere and not thinking of the consequences, but then seeing people like Alyssa Milano, oh, well, that's an option. No,
Right.
it's not. It's no, especially for a child that age.
Yeah, no kidding.
I will never forget that young girl, never. And I often wonder how she is, and pray that she was able to cope. I don't remember seeing her in the room afterwards, but then again, I was kind of self-absorbed after the procedure, so
Right.
I hope that she didn't go through with it, but I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, if she didn't go through it, it's because she called the cops and got her piece of crap father taken care of.
I hope so.
The
Or maybe the
breeder did.
clinic did. I don't know.
One would hope so. Unfortunately, those clinics don't have the best track record with that sort of thing. Let's just say the statistics are not encouraging. Just as even today, too often they'll mislead women when it comes to what's actually going to happen with the abortion. Too often they do just still refer to the child as mere tissue, and the only way they can, I think that basically happens anywhere that there isn't a state law requiring the mother to get an ultrasound or something like that. But that does just about bring us up to an hour here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, hearing Cece's story about everything that she's gone through in her life and her being willing to share it with us. And we hope that you're able to learn something from it, that no matter what situation you're in, there's certain things that just don't do, because you'll come to regret it later. If you are in some sort of if you're in an unsupportive situation, whether it's a boyfriend or husband isn't supportive, whether you're a victim of rape, seek help. It is out there. There are many more organizations than there used to be. Way back in '89, it's gotten a lot better as far as that goes. If you're not sure,
I'm willing to talk to anybody as well.
What's that?
I'm willing to talk to anybody. So if anybody wants to contact you and get my information, that's fine. If they need somebody to talk to, I'll be more than willing to talk to them.
There you go. And that's a big part of it right there. At the least, find someone to talk to, find someone to, and also if you've had an abortion and you're just starting to come to terms with it, please, you can get in contact with us at the show at Fighting Void on Twitter, or fightthevoid@gmail.com, and we can put you in touch with CC, and we might know a couple other people that would be willing to talk to you. And also, depending on where you're at in the country, we'll do what we can to help find you the help that you need. And trust me, there are people out there that want to help you. There are people out there that want to show you love and support. Help us find you. That's all I can say.
Absolutely.
Cece, is there anything else you want to say before we close it out?
I just implore people to be more gentle in their words. I see people just screaming at each other back and forth. There's no communication. There's no, we can't accomplish anything if we're just screaming at each other and
Right.
calling each other names. And I think to just sit down and have an honest conversation about how we feel and the realities of these situations without the name calling and the vitriol that just is spewed about. I think not going to, we would make such a difference if we could all just come together into some middle ground, and understand that there's victims in all of these situations, and they need help. And so instead of just drawing the battle lines, come to the table. Let's talk about it. Let's be adult and not be, 3-year-olds and fighting back and forth. It's just insane to me. And I'm disgusted at how mean some people can be, just downright cruel and hurling insults. And it's just, it's not conducive. It's not helping anything.
No, it is not. And in many cases, I don't think it's meant to, unfortunately. I did notice, actually, I'm sorry, but Eric in the chat was wondering how much your daughter might be learning about abortion, if anything, at school. I think I could say for my own kids, not a thing. But
no, she's not. As far as I know, they haven't brought it up.
Okay.
She's learning more about Islam than she is about abortion.
So it sounds like our kids' schools are similar type situation.
Yeah. She's very open to learning it from me.
Good.
But she's also, my daughter's not one of those, okay, mom said it must be true kind of things. She does her own research. She has her own very definite opinion, and we don't agree on a lot of things. She was very, very pro-choice until she heard my story, and she's still, pro-choice. She doesn't want to, tell somebody else what they can and cannot do with their body. But she understands now that there are consequences, and it's not just a procedure. And she's a very, very smart young lady, if I do say so. So she's
very good. Again, thank you a lot, CC, for coming on and being willing to share your story.
Thank you for having me.
And we'd be happy to have you back anytime. We don't even have to just talk about this. I'm sure we can. Yeah. And also, again, for anyone out there who does need help, try to find local pregnancy centers. If you need people to talk to, again, it's fightthevoid@gmail.com or @fightingvoid on Twitter. And get in touch with us, and we'll get you in touch with other people. We'll try to find you, again, that help, that shoulder to lean on, whatever it is that you need. We'll do our best. Also, if you have already had an abortion, look into Silent No More. That's full of all kinds of people who would have similar situations to yours. There's also Project Rachel, which does spiritual retreats to help people, to help women that are trying to process their own abortions. Look into them; they do great work. And again, there's tons of other organizations that are out there that I'm not even aware of. There are people out there. Again, help us find you. And with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of Fighting the Void. And we'll be back next week with something or another.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. That next week is still in flux, but tune in. We'll have something going on. All right. And until next time, keep fighting the good fight.